Well, let's expand this conversation because, yes, there's the side of the school, but don't forget, if perhaps you've seen that video of the mother, you'll see that she ended that video by saying that the child needs help, they need help, and that's the big part of this. All of the conversation we're having is geared towards ensuring that the children get appropriate help so that at least they turn this around for good in their lives. So we'll be speaking with an expert this morning who is a child advocate, joins us virtually as well. Bolanle Edwards is our next guest on the program this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to start from the statement I made, which of course was made by the mother of the child regarding help for the children. And this is what I believe should be played up amidst all of the banter on social media, the trending and all of that. But first, how do you see this whole situation? How did you respond to it?
Thank you very much. And it's been a very deep one for me as a child safety advocate. I've shared a lot of views with the people around me and in my community. And what I've come to realize is that this situation is not only, it's not uniquely, it's not that, it just happens that it happened to Chrisland. It could happen anywhere. And it's one too many, I must say. What has happened to parenting, what has happened to the health and safety policies that we put in place in our schools, what has happened to the communal love that we used to share? These are all the questions that were running through my mind when that story broke. And I tell you that it's been it grieves my heart that we've had to deal with this kind of situation in our environment, in this part of the world, where such things shouldn't even be heard of. But you know, like they say, it's a global village. It's time for everyone to sit up as stakeholders. Stakeholders being the government, being the parent most especially, being the school owner, and of course the community. I guess I really truly believe that after this we won't have such an issue again.
As parents, guardians, members of the society. But there's been that talk about, oh my goodness, the children of nowadays, that has been the expression. Things are getting bad, very decadent, and all of that. Is that what you see it as? Is this a peculiarity with this generation where we have access to technology, devices, social media, and perhaps...
Absolutely.
Is that what you see?
Absolutely,
as well?
I agree with you. I agree with you. I will take your mind back to pre-COVID and during COVID and post-COVID. I tell you that the statistics of the use of device increased by 95%. And this is majorly for learning. It wasn't that the devices were not there before, but the usage increased by 95 or more %. Why? Because school needed to bring the children online so that learners won't stop, knowledge can continue. But what do we have? We've had parents who have gone to sleep. You know, you have parental guardians on all of these devices, but how many parents and guardians were able to use that means of making sure that children are being monitored whilst they're online? And now this is post-COVID. Devices have come to stay. This is where we are right now, Zooming and having this interview. Do we go to sleep and say that, well, you know, after all, children can use the device by themselves? This is where we need to come, you know, and put hands together. That, you know what, device will be there. The children are curious and they're thirsty for knowledge. It's now, the onus is now on the parents when the children are at home to monitor the use of this device and put proper, you know, monitoring system. And of course, when the school as well, the school can also do theirs. At any point in time, I believe that children should be monitored. And either you like it or not, I mean, the country where things work, in the advanced country, people use device even before COVID. But now that COVID has happened, we need to begin to realize that device must be used and must be used appropriately by those children. So, well, development, I don't know what you call it. You can call it development, you can call it exposure, you can call it whatever. But I still stand on the fact that children must be monitored on devices when they're using it.
You know, there are parents who say, I will never get my child a mobile phone until maybe 16, or when they're progressing to tertiary institutions. Some would say, well, I'm going to get them since they need to have access to these things. All you just need to do is, you know, sit them down and expose them to these things, give them early exposure so they won't be overwhelmed, or at least they won't be thirsting for it as a result of seeing others use it. So how can parents balance this? Because let's be honest, a lot of parents are trying to, you know, make money to care for the children, focusing on a lot of other things. So how can parents balance these things?
Okay. Let me paint this very practical scenario. You have a baby, an 8-month-old baby, and the baby is still on milk. And you just can't wait for the child to start taking amala and ewedu. How do you think that baby is going to receive it? It's going to constipate that child. The child might end up having health issues. And the child, obviously the system is not ready to take in that meal at that time, you know. So I said that to say this, that children, underage children, have no business whatsoever using a mobile phone. The only reason why I would concede a little bit to children, of course, maybe from the age of 13, to use phone, is the fact that for security reasons, because I take security and safety to children, and I believe that at any point in time, it's also good for you to keep tab with your children, especially when they are home alone. And there's a need for an emergency. For underage children, I don't see why parents should be giving children iPhones, not even in local parlance, what they call palasa phone. They give them the very sophisticated Android phones to use. And I'm wondering, by the time the child becomes a teenager, full-grown adult, what will the child be using at that age? Because you had already thrown that, you know, how will I put it now? You've given that child the opportunity to begin to feel larger than life and feel that, oh, you can actually use you can use an iPhone. And it becomes a problem when you can't afford to keep up with the beats. So really, for parents who are finding it difficult you must start early. Please take charge and take hold of these children. Make sure that you do not give them what you cannot handle.
Okay, so mobile phones on the one hand, but that's not the only mode of exposure children have these days. They see
there's devices
and devices as well. But they see their parents. They learn from their parents, either passively or actively. The society as well, the movies that they watch, the kind of content that they see, and all of that. I know there's that saying that it takes a village to raise a child, even though it's just two parents that give birth to that child. So what are we missing really as a society, as parents, in ensuring that we set the right examples for children? So when they look around, they see at least good examples that they can emulate, because clearly these things don't happen on children. It's something they've learned from someone or from somewhere.
Definitely. I agree with you. You see, when I keep hearing stories like this, it takes my mind back to when I was growing up. And I knew that we had a communal kind of parenting then. When a neighbor sees you, that neighbor doesn't look away when you're doing something wrong. That neighbor calls your parents, first calls you and pulls your ears and tell you that what you're doing is wrong, before he will now drag you to your parents' house and tell your parents that, hey, watch this girl, she's not behaving well. The same thing is what is happening now. But what has changed is the look away factor. People now do, it's me, myself, and I. It's none of my business. And when it becomes your business, it's somebody's business, they look at you and say, oh, why can't you mind your business? What's your business in my business? It takes a village to raise a child. When we started advocacy, I recall very well how people used to look at us. and tell us that, hey, it's my business to drive my child without using a seatbelt in the car. And I say, wow, it's your business to drive a child without using the seatbelt. And once anything happens, perhaps the child, gets involved in an accident, and the child gets thrown out of the windshield. It becomes a communal problem. So what's going on right now? That we need to begin to take charge and take hold of our responsibility as caregivers, as guardians, as parents, and as a community, and as a society as a whole. What went wrong with our parenting system? What has happened to how parents now concede to listening to all kinds of, bad music lyrics? Your children are dancing to it. You're dancing to it with them. You're watching children, you're watching movies that children of that age shouldn't be watching, and you're not putting control to all of these things. They're on the screen 24/7. I mean, we have children who do not even sleep. They probably catch up with about 2-3 hours of sleep before going to school. Why? Because they are busy on the internet, surfing all sorts of sites.
To this as well.
And parents are not even aware of this.
The other side to this as well is the fact that children actually spend way more time in school compared to at home. I mean, once they get home in a few hours, they go to bed and they're back in school where they spend most of their productive time as well. So there's also the huge role for schools to play in all of this, which is why we're even talking about this in the first place, because, I mean, it happened on the time of a school. But I'll end on the point which I started with, which is in terms of the kind of support the children need. I left maybe the best for the last now. So what kind of psychosocial support should we be looking at for the children and other children that have been a victim of this, or of the ills of the society, as it were? What kind of support should we be giving them so we don't make them, as was said, accidental celebrities?
Okay, thank you. I will take it from the point of the Child Rights Act 2003. Section 2 specifically talks about the protection and the well-being of our children, of a Nigerian child. Now let's bring it home and localize it to each of the schools. For every private school, every private school in Nigeria must have what we call the health and safety policy in place. And the health and safety policy takes care of everything that has to do with the protection of that child that is under your care. That policy guides and guards you on how to relate and handle children. It also talks about the counseling. Peradventure, we have children who have been abused or been bullied, name it. It also takes care of them. And it is very important that we need to begin to look inward as a school and as a stakeholder, that when such things do happen to these children, please, can we blow the whistle? And blowing the whistle doesn't mean that you're telling the entire world that this has happened and taking place under your roof. No, you're blowing the whistle so much so that the child can begin to get the appropriate help at the right time. Because I tell you what, if this child grows up, because it doesn't end there. Like they say, internet doesn't forget. Internet doesn't forget. Everything you store up on the cloud stays on the cloud. And every child that must grow up healthy shouldn't go through this kind of psychological trauma. So every child that a school has identified to have some kind of issue, so to speak, must begin to get help immediately and should not be covered up. Covering it up will not help anyone. It won't help the parent. It won't help the child most especially. But please, let's blow the whistle and begin to get the appropriate help. Counseling, and making sure that, yes, because I can't even imagine what these children are going through right now. Right. I'm wearing their shoes and trying to feel their pulse. And they're in a very bad shape.
Right. We hope we can turn all of this, bad energy and all into good for them in the future. But we'd like to thank you so much, madam, for your time. Barnley Edwards is a child advocate. She's been shedding light on the way forward. Thank you again.
You're welcome.